24-hour survival challenge out here in the wilds of Northern California.
In this challenge, if I want to eat, I have to hunt and forage. I've got to make my own shelter, my own fire. I've got to purify water. But here's the kicker. My entire toolkit has to be what I've found, made, and modified out in the wasteland. I've searched every roadside ditch and free pile, and I've found some real gems. From knives, to cook pots, to full-on kayaks. This is the Wasteland Survival Challenge.
Welcome back. This is the Wasteland Survival Challenge Volume 3. I've got a few pieces of kit I'm going to be using on this survival challenge. A pot my brother found for me. I found some plastic sheeting. I'm so happy about this. This is definitely going to come in handy. Some dollar store rope I found in a free pile. It's an old sandwich container. I think it had sliced deli meats in it. My wasteland knife. I made the sheath from a piece of plastic that floated up on the seashore. Used a nail to punch holes in it and 50-pound braid to sew it all up. It's a fish scaling knife. Not the best for, woodworking, but it'll do. I even got a little bungee here from tent poles, and I use that as sort of a secondary lock on it. This is a really cool find. It's a knockoff Swiss Army knife. No blade on it, but it does have a saw blade, which makes me very happy. Found a pair of pliers. I used this to modify some coat hangers to make the tip for my frog gig for frogging tonight. And then I've got some char, natural char that I made in here, kind of like char cloth. It's an old pellet tin. Got a piece of chert. This is our local equivalent to flint. It makes a nice spark, especially when you pair it with the end of a master lock. That's my striker. So that's my flint and steel kit for making fire. For sleeping, I've got a Pilates mat that I found in a free pile. See if that's comfortable. Dry bag my brother found in the river. And then I found a ton of blankets and a ton of sleeping bags in the wasteland, but that's where I draw the line. I'm not sleeping in somebody else's sleeping system, so I'm allowing myself one cheat, which is a wool blanket.
My primary objective in this challenge is to build shelter. So the first thing I'm going to do is use the saw on that broken Swiss Army knife, and I'm going to cut 2 forked sticks and 1 longer pole, all of these being willow. I'm going to arrange those in such a way that I've got a tripod, and then once those are locked together, I'm going to reinforce them with a bit of cordage. For this, I am using the cordage from the dollar store that I found in a free pile, and it's working pretty well to lash everything together and give it a little bit of extra support. Now the knots I used here are nothing special. I'm just going to reinforce this with 3 half hitches to really lock it together. But the tripod is a very stable formation, so this is what I want. 1 ridge pole and 2 beams that'll be basically the door of my shelter. Now I want to even out the ground underneath it. If I was making a debris bed, I wouldn't be too worried about it, but because I'm sleeping on a Pilates mat I've never tested before, I want to make sure I fill in any gaps. Now, one of the cool things about finding a giant sheet of plastic in the wasteland is this makes shelter building so much easier. This really goes together very quickly, and as a result, I've got my shelter system built in a matter of minutes rather than a matter of hours if I was making a debris shelter. So I'm going to slide that mat into place, add my blanket, and that's it. Done deal. Shelter complete.
All right, shelter is complete, and now it's time to go try to find some food. Let's go look for blackberries, feral apples, and wild grapes. Now this is something I wasn't expecting to find, but these are rose hips. So these are chock full of vitamin C. They are very much edible, and I'm going to use these to make a nice vitamin C floral tea in the morning. First edible. All right, these are another prize specimen that come out. Late summer is when they start to really mature into the early fall. These are wild grapes, and they are absolutely wonderful. This is a rare score right here. They are perfectly ripe. Islay in the family Prunus, the same family as your domestic plums. And there's domestic plums growing around here, but their season is already come and gone. These are a little bit later bloomers. You'll notice I'm going to spit these out. The skin is super thin, the flesh is very thin, the pit is huge, and just like any other stone fruit, it contains cyanide. So if you eat the stone, the pit itself, it'll kill you. But some of California's native tribes actually targeted these, and they learned how to extract the edible portions of that pit and get rid of the toxins through a process we refer to as extractive foraging. We'll talk more about that in a future video. Let's add those to the basket. As I mentioned before, one of my favorite things about the periphery of civilization out here are feral apples. The ripe ones are up in the back here. That'll work. Had to work for that one. Fell right on a stick here. Yeah, that's perfect. Now we finally found it. This is what I was looking for all along. These are Himalaya blackberries. It's the very end of the season, so there's not a lot of them. But that's okay, because I came out here looking specifically for these and ended up finding all kinds of other goodies along the way. Got vitamins, minerals, got sugars, everything's packed away, and now it's time to go try to find some meat protein. All right, so I've made it out here to my spot. I've just seen some crayfish over here, so I need to get a net together ASAP. First thing I need to do is I'm gonna fell a small diameter piece of willow. I'm gonna bend it. I'm gonna use the mesh door from a tent that I found to be the netting.
Well, I've said it once and I'll say it again. Willow is well adapted to being torn out of the ground by any major flash flood that comes through, and as a result, it does very well when you trim it up a bit. So I have no problem cutting down some green vegetation to make this net. Now I was trying to bend the ends of this fork into a hoop and I ended up breaking one of them, so I just decided to roll with that and make sort of a triangle shaped net, undoing all of my cordage from the dollar store cordage that I found, and this is allowing me to lash it all together. And then from here I'm going to add in that net from the tent that I found, and all in all, not the prettiest net ever, but I think it's going to work just fine.
All right, here it is, world's ugliest net. Could have taken some time to really cinch it up a little bit, but it doesn't really need anything more than that. Just a little spot here to catch them. I'm just going to try to scoop them up, see if I can catch maybe 5 or 6. If I can, then we've got food in the bag. And when the sun goes down, the frogs are a-croaking. We're going frog gigging.
If you look closely down in that muddy water, you'll actually see a little red swamp crawdad bubbling away. I saw him from a distance, so I crept on in here using my net, and with one foul swoop, there it is, the very first one in the bag. This is a Louisiana crayfish, or red swamp crayfish. These are totally invasive, totally delicious, but as I understand it, if you catch them, you're not even allowed to release them because they're so invasive. So now that I've got one in the bag, I'm going to keep trying, see if I can add a few more, and see if I can turn this into a meal. Now the next one I was trying for was caught up in the vegetation here, so I just kind of set that net aside and went in with my hands, and lucky for me, I was actually able to get a hold of this guy even without the net. Anyway, I ended up using that net a few more times, ended up getting a couple more, and so within about a half an hour, I had 4 crawdads in the pot, which was pretty awesome. Now that I've got a little bit of meat protein set aside, my sights are on something a little bit bigger. So I felled another piece of willow. I'm just kind of trimming it down a little bit with this scaling knife, using more of that cordage as well as some fragments of a wire coat hanger that I had to make a gig. While I'm dragging in my boat here, I'll talk more about that in a moment. I used some tape that I found to rig up my flashlight as well as my GoPro, and check this out. Well, that's about as wasteland as it comes. I had to modify the on-off switch on this old light that I found. Got the GoPro, I even wasteland duct taped that thing on there. And then I got that wasteland coat hanger tip. Hopefully that gives us a nice point of view. And that's how it looks. Point of view from the frog gig. Pretty cool. My brother also found this headlamp in the wasteland. He gave it to me for Christmas, so this was in my stocking. Pretty stoked on this too.
Wasteland boat my buddy fixed, gave to me, and then I had to refix with some plastic welding. I found tons of these life preservers out in the wasteland, so safety first. I'm gonna go out in there, see if I can find some frogs. Let's do this. Well, when I got on the water, it was so peaceful, so beautiful. I really love kayaking around on these stretches of calm waters in the lowlands. Anyway, I had about an hour as the sun was starting to go down to just kind of relax and get into it. I absolutely love going for frogs. It's one of my favorite things to do. I know it can be kind of brutal for some people. If that is you, maybe skip this. But that being said, these are invasive American bullfrogs. They're not supposed to be here in California, and they do tremendous environmental damage. They eat our native frogs, they eat native fish, native birds, native insects, and so this is definitely a species to target, a species that you can eat with a clean conscience. You're actually doing good for the environment. So I got a few of these absolutely massive bullfrogs on this outing, and I am so stoked because these guys taste amazing. So yeah, just make sure you know your identification and don't go for those native frogs. They are very much protected. Justin's headlamp for the win. That was amazing. My little light worked pretty good too with the modified on-off switch. 3 big bullfrogs, and I was just hoping for 2. So they're not croaking at all. It's too cold. But luckily it's too cold, because that means that the mosquitoes that were eating me alive for about an hour are not really biting anymore, so that's good. I'm gonna head back to the launch and I'm gonna go make camp. All right, home sweet home. Looks pretty nice in there. Well, it turns out I would take a debris bed over a Pilates mat any day of the week. That was not my most comfortable night's sleep. My priority now is water. It's usually my first or second priority, but since I've been on the river and since I showed up with a gallon of water to start this, I've waited until now to replenish my water reserves. But of course I need to boil it in order for it to be clean to drink. I also set to cleaning those bullfrogs, and I got a huge yield. That entire pan right there just completely loaded with fresh meat, as well as those nice, clean, and very lively crawdads. My next priority was to get some fire making materials together, so I started with the dry leaves of mugwort, which grows along these creeks, as well as some grasses and whatever hardwood twigs I could pick up under the trees. Once I was back at camp, it was time to get out my flint and steel kit and start trying to get a spark to land right in my tinder. So first things first, I just want to show you how this works. This is my striker, which is a hardened piece of steel. High carbon steel would also work if you were using, say, a piece of a file. And in here, my old pellet tin, I've made the char previously. This is natural char rather than char cloth, so I'm actually going to strike sparks using this piece of chert down into that pile of natural char. It doesn't take much. You can barely see these sparks, but look at this. I'm not going to cut this scene because I want you to see the whole process. As I'm blowing on it, you can really see how it starts to glow in here. It just caught one spark right in that natural char, and now I have a whole bunch of embers ready to go. Now keep in mind, as I'm transferring this into my tinder bundle of grass and mugwort to get this fire going, I've already cleaned the ground here, removed the vegetation underneath my feet, and I've got my water here as well. And there is no way that I'd be having a fire if this was in Southern California, but instead it's the fall in Northern California,
and so as long as I attend it, it can be safe. Now I made sure that I closed up that char tin, and that way I'm not burning up the leftover natural char, and that way I can throw a spark into that later on. You can already see this tinder bundle is starting to smoke, and now I'm trying to use those freediver lungs to concentrate my air on one spot. I try to blow around on it until I find where it really starts to smoke, and then cultivating that pyramid of fire, the balance of oxygen, heat, and fuel. I'm going to concentrate my breath on that one spot where it smokes the most, and hopefully after a few breaths it'll burst into flame, which is exactly what it's doing now. Now this tinder is not going to burn very long because it's just grass, so I'm going to add a little bit more grass to the top, and then I'll start adding small diameter twigs, and then medium, and then large, and that's how I'm going to build this up into a fire. And again, I'm not walking away from it. I'm going to watch this every minute that I have an open flame. That's the only way to do this safely, and also I'm not going to do this if it's an ultra windy day where this fire could get out of hand. But look at that. Nice beautiful fire. We'll let it burn down to coals, and then we'll start purifying water and cooking. So it takes quite a bit of fuel and time to bring this pot to the boil, but I need this to be at a rolling boil for at least a minute at sea level, and that's going to be enough to purify that water and kill any potential giardia or cryptosporidium, the kind of stuff that lives in slow-moving water that you do not want living in your gut. It can cause all kinds of problems. So once I got it to a rolling boil, I added in my rose hips and let them steep, and then the next priority was to go through and dispatch all of my crawdads before I threw those on the coals. I think it's just a little bit more humane to dispatch them before you go throwing them on the heat. You'll still see them moving around a bit. That's just the nerves firing, but very, very fresh and wonderful. Now, this style of cooking is an old Aboriginal method. It's been used by traditional indigenous societies around the world for thousands of years. You just take whatever it is you're going to cook and put it right in the coals. So I'm going to do the exact same thing with the frog legs. And yeah, you'll get a little bit of ash and a little bit of charcoal on them here and there, but for the most part, it's a pretty clean way of cooking and gives it a nice little barbecue flavor. So as that's cooking, I'm going to give a little taste test to my rose hip tea, and it was quite nice. A nice subtle kind of rose flavor with a little bit of a tartness from the vitamin C. Quite good. Next, I want to flip some of these crawfish. Some of these are actually done already, so I'm going to pull a tail out of here, crack it, and just take a look at it. Looks like it's nice and steamy and red and beautiful, and yeah, quite delicious as well. So this is a great way to cook and very, very simple. And as my frog legs were cooking, I decided to get into those feral apples. Perfectly juicy and sweet and crisp. Absolutely wonderful. Now, I said I only had one cheat and brought along that wool blanket, but in reality I also brought along some of these flavor packets. I find these all over the place in the wasteland, so I'm not too worried about the cheat. I'm going to make up a little sauce for my frog legs. Like I said, it pretty much tastes like barbecue at this point, but the difference between a survival food and something that tastes somewhat like comfort food can be a little sauce. So I really do recommend you carry some packets in your survival kit. It makes a tremendous difference in the flavor of your food. Well, there it is, folks. 24-hour survival challenge. Dude. Oh man, I was hungry. Frog can have such a firm texture, very similar to chicken. Very nice, clean, white meat. But if you think about it, in a wasteland survival situation or any other kind of survival situation, you find yourself near slow-moving water where there's frogs. It's basically like going to the store and getting a leg of chicken. Crayfish, I've already got in there. You know the drill with crayfish. These guys have pretty small claws, just a little bite-sized piece of meat. Remember that there is a vein that runs up the back of them. That is the poop chute. We want to devein them if we can. That's what that is right there. Wild grapes. These have seeds, so you gotta spit the seeds, but
So sweet. Wild apple. Blackberries. One of my favorites. Nice and tart, nice and sweet at the same time. And those wild plums. Spit the pits though. Well folks, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned some things. And until next time, keep the old ways alive.
In the wasteland, and I'm living in a swamp all day, and I gig my own frogs and cook it. Follow me as I do this challenge by myself.